how is it even possible that in a week where tech companies are just casually committing $130 billion to build artificial superintelligence, the most valuable thing in the world to the average person is like just a faster cup of morning coffee?
Right. I mean, it sounds like a punchline, honestly, but it's actually the perfect summary of the global economy right now. The gap between what the architects of the future are trying to build and, what ordinary people actually want to experience day to day, it's just never been wider.
Yeah, totally. And, well, bridging that gap is basically our mission today. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are unpacking the July 30, 2026, 4 p.m. news brief from the Daily Tech Reader.
And for those of you listening, this source is just an incredibly dense, comprehensive daily digest. It covers everything: technology, geopolitics, markets, science, culture, you name it.
Exactly. And today, we are exploring this collision of grand ambitions and, well, real-world frictions. We're going to connect the dots between Wall Street's absolute obsession with AI, a heavily militarized global shipping crisis, some really extreme environmental shifts, and why, amidst all of this macro chaos, people are just clinging so tightly to their daily routines.
Yeah, because while these news items might seem completely disconnected when you're just scrolling past the headlines on your phone, they actually share a really distinct underlying theme.
Right, which is what?
Well, we're looking at global infrastructure, both the digital networks we are so desperately trying to build and the physical environments we currently inhabit, and both are under immense, unprecedented strain. Basically, the blueprints for the future are hitting the very real physical limitations of the present.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I want to start with the digital world, since that is where the future is allegedly being constructed. But as we're seeing in the markets today, the bill for that future is coming due immediately.
Oh, absolutely. It's coming due right now.
The tech section of this brief reads like a tale of two wildly different realities, specifically between Microsoft and Meta. Microsoft is just having a massive, undeniable win. I mean, they reported $90 billion in quarterly revenue.
Wow.
Yeah. And Azure, their cloud computing platform, that grew by 43%. But the metric that really stands out to me is that Microsoft 365 Copilot surpassed 30 million paid users.
See, that is the key right there. 30 million paid enterprise users is the threshold that changes the narrative entirely. Because for the last couple of years, simply announcing a massive AI research strategy, that was enough to keep investors happy.
Just saying the word AI was enough.
Exactly. But that era of AI hype is officially over. We have entered the era of AI accountability. Microsoft isn't just building abstract models anymore. They are delivering measurable evidence that enterprise AI adoption can actually produce reliable, recurring revenue.
Right, the cash is actually coming in.
Yes. And because they proved that, they are forecasting positive cash flow all the way through fiscal 2027. And the market rewarded the entire sector for it.
They really did. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both jumped, and Apple is nearing a $4.9 trillion valuation, which is just staggering.
Yeah.
But then you flip the page and look at Meta.
Oh, Meta, yeah. A very different story.
It's wild. The revenue actually grew by 28%, up to over $60 billion. But their free cash flow absolutely collapsed. It fell 91%.
91%. Just let that sink in.
I know. From over $8.5 billion a year ago down to just $784 million. And while their bank account is essentially draining, they simultaneously bumped up their lower-end capital spending forecast to a staggering $130 billion.
And naturally, investors completely punished them for it. They dropped the stock by 9%. I mean, Meta is perfectly illustrating the immense financial pressure that gets created when your infrastructure spending vastly outpaces your available cash.
Yeah, and to try to offset that fear, Meta floated this idea of renting out their unused computing capacity to other companies.
Which is just such a red flag for the market.
Okay, if you're listening to this, I want you to imagine that you and a friend open bakeries. Your friend, who is Microsoft in this scenario, is already selling 30 million cupcakes a day to corporate clients.
They're doing great.
Right. They have a line out the door. The cash register is ringing constantly. You, on the other hand, which is Meta, just bought $130 billion worth of massive industrial-scale ovens, watched your savings account drop by 91%, and now you're standing outside telling nervous investors, well, don't worry, if we can't figure out what to bake, we'll just rent our spare oven racks to the pizzeria down the street.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it shows exactly why the market freaked out. It signals a complete lack of immediate operational focus. What Thursday's market reaction really teaches us is that technical leadership must eventually show up in basic financial measures.
Cash flow is king, eventually.
Always. You can possess the most advanced AI models in the entire world, but operationalizing them is incredibly difficult. For instance, enterprise AI requires deterministic permissions.
Oh, wait, break that down for us. What does that mean?
So, in a corporate setting, if you deploy an AI assistant across your network, the system must definitively know that, say, the summer intern is not authorized to ask the AI to summarize the CEO's private emails.
Oh, right. That would be a disaster.
Exactly. But enforcing those strict security rules and permissions continuously across millions and millions of queries takes an enormous amount of computing power. That continuous compute drains cash flow.
Got it.
And if your systems are draining cash without yielding profit, the market will turn on you no matter how smart the AI actually is.
And what's wild is that the funding for all of this is incredibly incestuous, which just adds to the anxiety. Like the brief mentions NVIDIA's reported OpenAI financing guarantee.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
It's not just a minor footnote, right?
Yep.
NVIDIA is allegedly fronting money or guaranteeing loans for AI startups, specifically so those startups can turn around and buy NVIDIA's own chips.
It's vendor financing on a massive, massive scale, which means the capital propping up this entire industry is tightly woven into a single loop.
Right. And if one link in that circular funding chain breaks, the cascading effects would just be severe. The digital ambition is so precariously balanced.
It really is.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this brings us to the physical reality of all this digital ambition. Those massive AI data centers Meta is spending $130 billion on, they don't just exist in the ether.
No, they are massive concrete buildings on the ground.
Exactly, requiring immense physical power. And that requires fuel, which requires global supply chains, bringing us to the very real, very physical choke points of global trade that are currently under fire.
And just to be very clear for everyone listening right now, as we discuss the geopolitics of this next section, we are looking strictly at the mechanics and economics of these events based on today's reports.
Yes, absolutely.
We are not taking any political sides on the international conflicts themselves or endorsing any military actions by any country. We're just reporting what the source material outlines.
Right. We are purely looking at the economic engine and how it's being disrupted. And man, the disruption is highly volatile right now. We have U.S. military strikes hitting Revolutionary Guard command centers, missile sites, and drone facilities.
Which is a major escalation.
It is. We also have the Treasury Department imposing new sanctions on international networks supporting Iran's Mahan Air. And that sanctions list targets entities across China, India, Russia, and Iran.
Yeah, and Mahan Air is frequently cited in these briefs not just as a commercial airline, but as an alleged logistical transport arm for moving weapons, personnel, and funds.
So it's not just passenger flights.
No, not at all. By targeting the financial networks supporting it across multiple continents, the U.S. is utilizing financial pressure in tandem with military strikes. We also see the pushback, obviously, with Iran attempting strikes against American bases in Jordan and Kuwait.
Which U.S. officials say were intercepted, though Kuwait did report some casualties and damage.
Right. And furthermore, Iran is maintaining a very tight grip over the Strait of Hormuz, dictating exactly which commercial vessels can pass. Like, they recently permitted a Qatar energy tanker through while actively turning others away.
And the friction is expanding outward, too. There was a drone attack on a U.S.-owned gas storage tanker at Egypt's Damietta port.
That's a critical location.
Yeah, that is right near the Suez Canal. And it directly threatens one of the very few remaining export routes available to Saudi Arabia. So in response, Saudi Arabia has announced the formation of a 14-nation multinational maritime coalition meant to protect shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden.
And the brief mentioned 43 countries actually attended the meeting, right?
Yep, 43 attended, though Oman and the UAE haven't formally joined the initial group yet.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're actually witnessing here is the creation of a second maritime security system. The conflict is no longer localized to just one strait or one sea.
It's everywhere.
It is. We are seeing a coordinated application of three distinct types of pressure simultaneously. You have military kinetic action, like the drone strikes and the intercepts. You have financial action through the massive sanctions on supply networks like Mahan Air. And you have maritime coalition pressure, with nations banding together to physically escort and protect commercial tankers.
Let's trace the economic ripple effect of this for the listener because it is immediate. A drone strike at a single port in Egypt threatens a Saudi export route. That physical risk makes the market panic about supply, which keeps global energy prices elevated.
Which hits everything else.
Everything. We're looking at Brent crude staying over $91 a barrel right now. And the direct beneficiaries of this chaos are the energy producers. Shell just reported a $9.84 billion quarterly profit.
That is just an astronomical number.
It's more than double their total from a year ago. And their refineries are running at 102% of stated capacity.
It is the ultimate paradox of the current global economy, honestly. You have these exceptional, record-breaking producer profits occurring right alongside increasingly complicated and, frankly, heavily militarized shipping routes.
And this brings us right back to Meta and Microsoft.
Yeah.
You cannot build $130 billion worth of new computing capacity without factoring in the price of the oil that fuels the supply chains, transports the servers, and ultimately powers the grids.
Exactly. The cost of building the digital future is entirely dictated by the physical constraints of the present.
Yeah.
The physical grid is the ultimate bottleneck here. But, it isn't just the supply chain of energy that is strained right now. The actual physical environment that houses these grids and communities is moving into completely uncharted territory.
I really want to dive into the science and environment section of the brief next because this is where the sheer scale of the disruption becomes like almost surreal.
It really does.
We are seeing wildfire dangers completely shift their geography. After the severe outbreaks in France and Spain, the threat actually moved east, tragically killing 3 Greek firefighters recently.
That was awful to read about.
Yeah, terrible. The European Union is mobilizing aircraft and emergency teams toward Italy, Greece, and Central Europe. But it's also reaching places you just wouldn't associate with this kind of threat at all. There's a massive wildfire in eastern England forcing evacuations around Dunwich Heath.
Which, by the way, is a protected coastal habitat for rare birds.
Right. And it's also uncomfortably close to the Sizewell nuclear facilities. Officials say the blaze isn't expected to reach the nuclear plant, but still we are talking about major wildfires in rainy England.
Yeah, it's not exactly known for its dry brush.
Not at all. Meanwhile, Texas, Oklahoma, and the Southern Plains are dealing with this persistent, oppressive heat. The NOAA is forecasting a below-normal Atlantic hurricane season, while simultaneously expecting El Niño to strengthen through the winter.
It's just extremes everywhere.
And then we have public health anomalies on top of it. Michigan is currently managing over 8,100 cases of cyclosporiasis. 98 people are hospitalized.
And for context, cyclosporiasis is a microscopic parasite spread through contaminated food or water. Crucially, it is typically found in tropical or subtropical regions.
Wait, right, tropical. Federal investigators are looking into food suppliers across 4 states for a tropical parasite that has somehow hospitalized nearly 100 people in a northern state like Michigan.
It doesn't make sense historically.
And on top of that, the U.S. just recorded 2,318 measles cases. That is the highest annual total in 35 years, with 69% of those infections in people under the age of 20.
Which is a whole other kind of systemic failure.
I have to step back and just ask the obvious question here. It feels like we were just reading a laundry list of chaotic, geographically misplaced events, like tropical parasites in the Midwest, wildfires threatening English bird sanctuaries and nuclear plants. Why is this happening all at once?
This raises an important question about our foundational infrastructure, because we are witnessing the collapse of our historical baselines. For the last century, human society built its physical and social infrastructure based on historical averages.
Right, what we expected to happen based on the past.
Exactly. We engineered our power grids, our agricultural supply chains, and our emergency response protocols for the climate we used to have.
So the foundation we literally poured the concrete on is actually shifting beneath us.
Fundamentally shifting. Take the persistent heat in the Southern Plains you mentioned. The brief specifically notes that warm nights are limiting recovery.
Why does that matter so much?
That is a vital detail. When temperatures don't drop at night, physical infrastructure like electrical transformers, they don't have time to cool down. And human bodies don't get physiological relief. That massively increases continuous electricity demand on a grid that was built for intermittent peaks.
Oh, wow. I never thought about the transformers needing to cool off.
Right, they need that downtime. When you combine that continuous strain with El Niño, which is a climate pattern where warming ocean waters shift atmospheric circulation, compounding global heat, You push extreme, prolonged dry conditions into landscapes like England that simply aren't built to fight major summer blazes.
And the agricultural supply chains are importing risks too, which I guess explains the tropical parasites in Michigan.
Exactly. Our globalized food networks move produce so rapidly from warming subtropical regions into cooler climates that local health departments are suddenly dealing with pathogens they historically never had to screen for on this scale. The physical baseline is broken.
And that concept of broken baselines, that explains the measles outbreak perfectly, doesn't it?
It does, because we are seeing the exact same erosion in our communal immune systems. The brief notes that national MMR vaccination coverage has fallen to approximately 92.5%, with 16 states dropping below 90%.
Okay, but to a layperson, 92.5% still sounds like an A minus. It sounds like almost everyone is vaccinated. Why does a tiny drop trigger a 35-year high in cases?
Because the mathematics of herd immunity are not linear, measles has a transmission rate that is practically unmatched. One infected person can spread it to 12 to 18 others.
That's incredibly contagious.
It is. When your community vaccination rate is at 95%, the virus hits a wall. There are simply not enough vulnerable hosts for it to travel between. But when you drop to 92.5%, it isn't just a small crack in the wall. You have removed the firebreak entirely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the virus can now easily jump from person to person, ripping through the unvaccinated population, which is why 69% of the cases are young people. Our public health system relies on that 95% baseline to keep things quote-unquote normal. Without it, the system just fails.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the sheer scale of this tech conglomerates draining billions in cash to rebuild the economy, international maritime coalitions fighting for shipping lanes, environmental baselines collapsing, how does a normal person process this?
They look for control wherever they can find it.
Exactly. When the macro world feels entirely out of your control, the micro world becomes the only thing you can manage. Which brings us perfectly to the culture and work section of the brief and the phenomenal success of Starbucks.
It is such a fascinating psychological pivot. The average consumer is responding to all this global disruption by fiercely defending their daily routines.
Starbucks shares are up because they raised their annual sales and profit forecasts. Global same-store sales increased by 7.9%, marking 4 consecutive quarters of growth.
That's huge for a company of that size.
It is. And they didn't achieve this by introducing some massive, disruptive, AI-driven coffee machine. They did the exact opposite. They simplified their menus, they focused on staffing, and they reduced wait time.
They just nailed the basics.
Right, because if the entire world is chaotic, you just want to know that your morning coffee is going to taste exactly the same, cost what you expect, and be handed to you quickly without any surprises.
That desire for familiar stability stands in stark contrast to the disruptions happening everywhere else in the culture right now.
It's everywhere. The European wildfires aren't just an ecological disaster. The brief highlights how they are actively disrupting tourism and hospitality. People are evacuating from resorts they saved up all year to visit.
Imagine finally taking your family on vacation and having to run from a wildfire.
Exactly. And then France is implementing a social media ban for children under 15, which is causing massive compliance and age verification headaches for families and tech platforms alike. Even the fast fashion industry is upended, with companies like Shein facing tariff threats that could destroy their ultra-low price model.
The ground is just constantly shifting under the consumer's feet.
Even the entertainment note in the brief reflects this. There is strong interest in the theatrical release of the Odyssey.
The Homer epic.
Yes. Think about it, an epic poem about a guy navigating monsters, literal storms, and angry gods, just desperately trying to get back to his home and his familiar life. It is the perfect cultural mirror for right now.
It truly is. I mean, we are all Odysseus right now, just trying to get home. And from a broader business perspective, this highlights a critical insight that Silicon Valley often misses.
Which is?
The durable career and business advantage right now isn't necessarily inventing a new paradigm. It is the ability to turn complex strategy and expensive technology into reliable, frictionless, daily service. During periods of intense disruption, consumers heavily prioritize familiar public institutions and shared routines.
All right, let's take a breath and recap the journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the multi-billion-dollar AI gambles happening in the tech sector, where Microsoft is reaping the rewards of actual enterprise adoption, while Meta is, well, draining its cash flow, hoping to build the infrastructure of tomorrow. Yeah. Then we traced how that digital ambition relies on physical energy, which is currently bottlenecked by militarized choke points, drone strikes, and a newly formed maritime security system in the Middle East.
A very fragile supply chain.
Totally. Then we looked at how shifting environmental baselines are bringing wildfires to English bird sanctuaries and tropical illnesses to Michigan, while a tiny drop in vaccination rates completely shatters our public health fire breaks.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And finally, we saw how, in the face of all this massive global change, the simple, reliable success of a faster cup of coffee is what consumers are actually craving.
It is a vivid portrait of a world in transition, actively navigating the friction between what we desperately want to build and what our physical reality will actually allow us to maintain. And, it leaves us with a final thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
The entire technology sector, backed by trillions of dollars in capital, is currently hyper-focused on who can build the most revolutionary, disruptive future infrastructure. The entire financial model is based on the idea of disruption.
Move fast and break things, right?
Exactly. But when you look at the state of the physical world, where energy is fiercely contested, climates are drastically shifting, and consumers are just deeply exhausted by the constant chaos, perhaps the most valuable companies of the next decade won't be the ones that disrupt our lives the most.
That's a great point.
Perhaps the real winners will be the companies that manage to maintain stability, the ones that figure out how to keep the familiar intact when the ground underneath everything else is shaking.
The ones that figure out how to build the skyscraper that flexes with the earthquake.
Yeah.
Instead of just pretending the ground is still solid.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. To everyone listening, keep questioning the world around you, hold on to those routines that bring you peace, and we will catch you next time.